Dr. James Chen stood in his hospital office at 2 a.m., staring at the bottle of antidepressants in his hand. He'd just saved a man's life in the ER. His bank account had $340,000. His parents were proud. His colleagues respected him. And he wanted to die. Not literally, but the person he'd become? That person needed to disappear. What happened next would make his family stop speaking to him for an entire year. His colleagues would call him insane. His financial advisor would quit. But 3 years later, Dr. James Chen would be making more money than he ever did as a physician, teaching people how to stand on a surfboard. This is a story of a man who had everything society tells you to want, and why he burned it all down to start over at 36. If you want more true stories of bold decisions and the people who risk everything to reinvent their lives, subscribe now so you never miss the next leap. James Chen's life looked perfect on paper. 12 years of education. 4 years of undergraduate pre-med at UCLA. 4 years of medical school. 4 years of emergency medicine residency. Over $300,000 invested in becoming Dr. Chen. By 36, he was an attending physician at a Level 1 trauma center in San Diego, making $280,000 a year. He owned a condo in La Jolla, drove a BMW, had a retirement account most people only dream about. His parents, Chinese immigrants who'd worked brutal hours at their restaurant to put him through school, finally had what they'd sacrificed everything for, a son who was a doctor. But here's what the Instagram post didn't show. James was working 60-hour weeks, including night shifts that destroyed his circadian rhythm. He'd see gunshot wounds, car accidents, dying children. Then he'd go home and lie awake, replaying every decision, wondering if he'd missed something that could cost someone their life. The pressure was unbearable. He started taking Zoloft at 33. By 35, he'd added Ambien just to sleep 4 hours a night. He had no real relationships. Every woman he dated eventually left because he was married to the hospital. His breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. He'd just finished a 16-hour shift. A 19-year-old had died on his table from a drug overdose. James had done everything right, textbook perfect, but the kid was too far gone. He walked to his car as the sun rose, sat behind the wheel, and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt genuinely happy. Not content, not accomplished, not proud. Happy. That's when a memory hit him. 8 years ago, during medical school, he'd taken a weekend trip to Costa Rica with friends. They'd gone to a surf town called Tamarindo. James had taken a single 2-hour surf lesson. For those 2 hours, nothing else existed. No exams, no student debt, no pressure, just the ocean, the board, and the present moment. It was the most peace he'd felt in years. Sitting in that hospital parking lot, James made a decision that would horrify everyone who loved him. James didn't quit immediately. He wasn't that reckless. Instead, he started researching. Late at night, after shifts, he'd browse surf instructor certification programs. Cost of living in Costa Rica. Visa requirements. He told himself it was just a fantasy, a mental escape valve. But the fantasy wouldn't go away. 3 months later, James did something that started the avalanche. He booked a 2-week vacation to Costa Rica, just to check it out. He stayed in Tamarindo, the same town from that weekend years ago. He took surf lessons every morning. And something happened that he hadn't planned for. He met Carlos, a 52-year-old American who'd quit his corporate job 15 years earlier to teach surfing. Carlos wasn't rich. He lived in a modest house, drove a beat-up truck, made maybe $40,000 a year. But Carlos was happy. Genuinely, undeniably happy. One evening, drinking beer on the beach, James asked him, "Don't you ever regret it? Giving up the career, the money, the status?" Carlos laughed. "Man, I regret the 25 years I wasted before I did this. You know what nobody tells you? The golden handcuffs get tighter every year. Every promotion, every raise, every little upgrade to your lifestyle. It's another lock on the cage." James flew back to San Diego on a Sunday night. By Wednesday, he'd contacted a real estate agent to list his condo. By Friday, he'd had the conversation he'd been dreading his entire life. "You want to do what?" His mother's voice could have shattered glass. James sat across from his parents in their living room, the same living room where they'd celebrated his acceptance to medical school, his residency match, every milestone that had led to this moment. "I want to take a break from medicine," he said carefully. "Move to Costa Rica. Teach surfing. Just for a year. Maybe 2. His father said nothing, just stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. His mother started crying. "We sacrificed everything for you," she said. "We worked 16-hour days at the restaurant. We sent you to good schools. We paid for your exam prep. I know, Mom. I know. And I'm grateful." "You're grateful?" His father finally spoke, his voice cold. "This is how you show gratitude? By throwing away everything we built." "I'm not throwing it away. You're 36 years old, James. You have a career. A real career. And you want to become a beach bum." The conversation ended with his mother refusing to hug him goodbye. That was just the beginning. His colleagues at the hospital thought he was having a mental breakdown. His department chief pulled him aside. "James, if this is burnout, we can adjust your schedule. Take a sabbatical. But quitting," his financial advisor was blunt. "You're walking away from a job that will earn you $10 million over your career to make, what, 30 grand teaching tourists to surf? James, I'm legally obligated to tell you this is financial suicide." Even his friends didn't understand. "Dude, everyone hates their job sometimes," one said. "That's why it's called work. You don't see me quitting my law practice to become a ski instructor." But James had already made up his mind. In September, he sold his condo, walked away with $180,000 after mortgage was paid off. He sold his BMW. He canceled his gym membership, his subscription services, everything tying him to his old life. His parents stopped returning his calls. By October, Dr. James Chen had a one-way ticket to Costa Rica, $195,000 in savings, and absolutely no plan beyond teach surfing and figure out. The first 6 months were harder than anything he'd experienced in medical school. Mini twist, month 3, James quickly got his surf instructor certification. He was working at a surf school, making $15 per hour plus tips. Some days, he'd make $120. Other days, $60. He was living in a small apartment that cost $600 per month. His budget was tight, but manageable. The problem wasn't money. The problem was purpose. Teaching beginner surf lessons was fun for about 6 weeks. Then it became repetitive. The students were great, enthusiastic tourists living out their vacation fantasies. But James would watch them paddle away after their lesson, and he'd feel empty. He'd traded a job where he saved lives for a job where he helped people stand on a piece of foam for 2 hours. The doubt was crushing. At night, he'd lie awake thinking, "What have I done? I spent 12 years becoming a doctor. My parents are right. I'm a beach bum with a medical degree." Month 4 was worse. The surf school owner reduces hours because it was low season. James was making barely $2,000 per month. He started eating rice and beans to save money. His savings account, that $195,000 cushion, was shrinking, not dangerously, but enough to make him anxious. He left a $280,000 per year job for this. Month 5, James called his department chief, asked if his position was still available. "It's filled," the chief said, "but I can put you on a list. Something might open up in 6 months. James hung up and stared at the ocean. He was 37 years old, living in a foreign country, teaching surf lessons to tourists with no backup plan. His parents still weren't speaking to him. He felt more lost than he'd ever felt in his life. Then month 6 happened. The turning point came from an unexpected conversation. James was teaching a lesson to a couple from Seattle. The husband, Mark, mentioned he was a physical therapist specializing in sports injuries. During the lesson, Mark wiped out badly and tweaked his shoulder. Instinctively, James went into doctor mode. He assessed the injury, explained what was likely strained, showed Mark some gentle mobility exercises. "Dude," Mark said, amazed, "you really know your stuff. Are you a PT?" "No," James said. I used to be an ER doctor." Mark stared at him. Wait, you're a medical doctor teaching surf lessons. Long story. That night, Mark and his wife invited James for dinner. The conversation that followed changed everything. Have you ever heard of surf therapy? Mark asked. James hadn't. Mark explained. It was an emerging field combining surfing with physical therapy and mental health treatment. Programs for veterans with PTSD. Adaptive surfing for people with disabilities. Trauma recovery through ocean-based therapy. There's a clinic in California doing it, Mark said. But I've never heard of anyone doing it here. And Costa Rica would be perfect for it. James went home that night and fell into a research rabbit hole. He discovered surf therapy programs in California, Australia, South Africa. He read studies showing surfing's effects on anxiety, depression, PTSD. He found statistics on veteran suicide rates and how ocean therapy was helping. And he realized something. He didn't have to choose between being a doctor and being a surf instructor. He could be both. James spent the next 2 months building something no one had attempted in Costa Rica, a surf therapy retreat center. His concept, week-long program combining surf instruction with mental health support, physical therapy, and medical oversight. Target clients, burned-out professionals, people recovering from trauma, anyone seeking a reset. He wasn't a psychiatrist, but he could partner with licensed therapists who'd work remotely. He was a medical doctor who could ensure safety and provide emergency care. He was now a certified surf instructor who could teach. James invested $40,000 of his savings into a pilot program, renting a small house, hiring a local therapist, building a website, getting proper insurance and licensing. He called it Wave Reset. His first marketing push? He wrote an article on Medium about his own story. Doctor quits to teach surfing, discovers surf therapy. It went viral in wellness circles. 20,000 views in a week. He got 47 inquiries. He launched his first retreat in month 9 with 6 clients. Week-long program. $2,500 per person. $15,000 revenue. $8,000 in expenses. $7,000 profit in a single week. It worked. 3 years later, Wave Reset runs 32 retreats per year. James caps each retreat at 8 clients for $3,200 per person. That's $25,600 per retreat, with operating costs around $12,000 per retreat. He nets roughly $13,600. 32 retreats times $13,600 equals $435,200 annual profit. He's earning more than he did as a doctor, with half the stress and twice the fulfillment. But here's what the numbers don't show. James reconnected with his parents 18 months after he left. His mother visited Costa Rica, saw what he'd built, met his clients. She cried, but this time it was different. I didn't understand, she said. I thought you were running away, but you were running towards something. His father took longer, but eventually he admitted, I wanted you to be successful. I just didn't understand there were different kinds of success. Today, James works about 35 hours a week. He surfs every morning before his clients wake up. He's in the best physical shape of his life. He's dating a woman who runs a yoga studio in town, something that would have been impossible with his old schedule. He still gets emails from former colleagues asking if he regrets his decision. His answer is always the same. I regret every year I waited. But the most surprising outcome? His medical skills didn't go to waste. They became his competitive advantage. Wave Reset isn't just a surf camp. It's a legitimate therapy retreat with medical oversight. That credibility has attracted corporate clients, insurance partnerships, and even VA contract discussions. The doctor who quit to teach surfing had accidentally built something bigger than he'd imagined, not because he planned it, but because he was willing to bet everything on the idea that happiness isn't something you earn after 30 years of suffering. It's something you choose, even when everyone calls you crazy for choosing it. So what's the real lesson in James Chen's story? It's not quit your job and follow your passion. That's terrible advice for most people. The lesson is this. The skills that made you successful in one life can become the foundation for a completely different life, if you're willing to reimagine how to use them. James didn't abandon his medical training. He redeployed it in a context that made him happy. He didn't reject stability. He redefined what stability meant. Not a guaranteed paycheck, but work he could sustain for decades without burning out. He didn't ignore his family's concerns. He proved them wrong by building something legitimate, not by defending his decision with words. And here's the truth most people won't tell you. The hardest part wasn't quitting. It wasn't selling his condo, or moving to another country, or learning to surf. The hardest part was sitting in that hospital parking lot, at 36 years old, admitting that everything he built was making him miserable. Most people never get to that moment of honesty. And for those who do, most choose to stay anyway. James chose differently, not because he was braver, but because he asked himself a question that changed everything. What if I die without ever finding out who I could have been? He decided the regret of not knowing was worse than the risk of failing. 3 years later, he's still in Costa Rica, still teaching people to surf, still waking up happy, and making more money than he ever did behind a hospital desk. If this story inspired you, subscribe and share it with someone who might be standing at the edge of their own bold leap today. Because the life you're afraid to live is probably the one you were meant for all along.